Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, I should say. My name is Lloyd Russell-Moyle. I'm the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Kurds in Turkey and Syria and vice chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Kurds in Iraq and the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Kurds in Iran. So you could say that I sit on all the different United Kurdish groups here in Parliament, and I'm delighted today to invite an important speaker to talk to us a bit about the current situation as he sees it, the work that he's been doing, and to address us more generally. Mr. Talabani is, of course, a leading politician in the PYU, but also, of course, led the intelligence agencies which led the fight back against Islamic State. The fascists that threatened all of our futures. And that fight back, as broadly as it was successful, was something that we all are thankful for. But there are still ongoing issues. There are ongoing issues, of course, with the relations in Turkey as well, and of course in Syria, a place in Rojava that I have visited and I know that you have been supportive of many times as well. So I will continue to visit as long as it is necessary to ensure that the people there are safe and secure. So look, without further ado, because you're not here to listen to me, I wish to invite Mr. Talabani to address you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I sit him down?
Or speaking down with a microphone if you wish. Otherwise
I can do a sitting down because I think it's going to take a long time. Thank you very much, Lloyd, Ibrahim, and the Center for Kurdish Progress for giving me this opportunity to be amongst this distinguished guests. Hopefully we can have a frank discussion on the ongoing issues in the region, Kurdistan, and try and give some solutions for all the problems existing in the region. I would like to start off with the regional dynamic and the influence of the regional countries and how they influence the governance in Kurdistan and Iraq, if that's okay, because there's so much happening all around us. I can start off with Iran and the current situation, the protests that are happening in Iran. What we see this time, the difference between the protests in Iran happening compared to the other protests, we see, first of all, women leading these protests. And there's a lot of youth involved in the protests. I think this is why the Iranians are finding it difficult at this time to deal with these protests. Whether these protests will bring about significant change, I mean regime change, I personally don't believe so for the reasons that I will mention, depending on how long they can continue with this protest, because we remember with the Shah regime it took 12 months of protest to bring about real change. And at the time, there was no real opposition, but they managed to get everybody under the umbrella of Imam Khomeini at the time, and they managed to put a head to the protest. At the moment, when you look at the Iranian opposition, I can start with the Kurdish opposition sitting in the Iraqi Kurdistan. They're split between 10 different groups. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to bring themselves together and speak with one voice. I think the same thing is happening with the Persians, with the Baluchis, with the Lurs. So unless there's a real opposition that can speak and guide these people and speak with one voice and lobby outside of Iran, I don't believe this protest eventually will bring about significant changes or real changes or regime changes in Iran. And what Iran is trying to do right now to project the problem outside of Iran, as we saw recently with the attacks against the bases of the Kurdish opposition groups in Slemania and Erbil region, brutal attacks actually, because there were men, women and children. Some of their schools were very close by. In some of those attacks, they didn't take any of this into consideration, unfortunately. But what they're trying to do is project the problems outside and to tell the outside world that actually these are external hands playing into this protest. This is an outside agenda, where in reality we all believe that this is an internal issue. 40 years of ruling, this younger generation is no longer accepting this kind of ruling, especially led by women. I think any fight led by women, usually they have good results. I know from my wife, whenever we have a fight at home, she usually wins. But it's unfortunate, really. I mean, the Iranian people, they're good people. They have suffered and they deserve better. But like I said, I don't see, this is my personal opinion, that these demonstrations can bring about significant changes or regime change, because there's no outside support, or there's no unity between the different ethnic groups outside of Iran. Like I said, the Iranians projected the problem outside, and now they are pressuring KRG, actually. They haven't stopped only with the attacks against the bases of the opposition in KRI. They are now pressuring KRG. They put KRG under a lot of pressure. They want to disarm the remaining groups in KRI right now. I know there were some meetings held in Tehran, and some of the representatives of both political parties were called to Tehran to discuss this issue, and the Iranians are serious, and they've put a timeline to this. And this can only bring about more problems, not only for the Iranian Kurds, but for Kurdistan regional government as well. Because these constant attacks is frightening people away, investors, and the international community. So I don't know how they're going to deal with this, the KRG, but I know the KRG is not capable of actually preventing the Iranians doing these sort of attacks, or doing these sort of incursions into KRI, as the Turks are doing on the other side. I'll come to that in a minute as well. And I've always believed KRG or KRI is in a difficult situation at the moment. There's disunity amongst the political parties already inside KRI. The pressure applied by the Turks, the pressure applied by the Iranians. The disunity in Baghdad actually is a sign of weakness also for us in Baghdad. But I know now, like I said, KRG is under a lot of pressure on what to do with the armed groups of the opposition, Iranian Kurdish opposition, sitting on this side, because the Iranians are serious, and they proved to be serious. If in the past we didn't take them seriously, we saw the recent attacks made against them, that they are serious and they are brutal. So KRG is in a difficult situation. They might have made some promises to try and push these guys away from the borders, but I think the Iranians demand disarmament of these groups, and also to be put in some sort of camps, as we've seen with the PKK in Mahmud, the camp in Mahmud, where there's PKK families and PKK members unarmed. Also, I think another demand of the Iranian government from KRG is to think about extraditing some of these groups in the future to places like Albania, as they did with the MHK and other groups, which I think this would be very difficult for KRG to agree to. But these are real demands coming from Iran. The KRG is not talking about it, but I'm willing to talk about it here, because people need to know about this. Maybe this will ease the burden on KRG, to be honest with you, because they need to get public support in rejecting some of these demands that the Iranian government have. Maybe disarming could be a tactical deal that KRG could make with these groups, but putting them in camps, I think these are families. Who's going to build these camps? Where are you going to put this? I mean, it's very difficult living in camps. I think it's going to be very difficult for these people, so this should be rejected by KRG. I hope both political parties will reject this kind of idea pushed by Iran, and the extraditing them should be rejected.
Yeah.
This is on Iran. briefly, then we will leave room for questions. I know the community, especially the Kurdish community, will have a lot of questions on these issues. The Iranians are influencing governance in Kurdistan and Iraq. As we saw in the last elections, the Iraqi elections, Sadr forming an alliance or coalition with KDP and Sunni groups, trying to form a majority government. We saw, I think, with the help of the Iranians, the Iranian proxies, and unfortunately PUK aligned with them that time, tried to slow down the process of government formation. In the end, it got to a stage where Sadr cracked and couldn't take the pressure any longer, and the coalition broke apart. And then, as we saw a few weeks ago, there was a government formed in Iraq, which mainly are the people who are close to the Iranian front. Of course, KDP and the Sunnis also joined later on, but I think the Iranians did it very, very cleverly. They managed to put pressure on some of these groups allied with Sadr. For example, we saw the number of attacks increase in Erbil, with the excuse of foreign intelligence services being present in Erbil. I think that was an excuse. There was no evidence that there was foreign intelligence services in Erbil, but we saw the drone attacks, the suicide drone attacks, the missile attacks increase. Within a matter of 3 months, there were so many attacks, and I think this was physical pressure on KDP to pull out of the, this is my opinion anyways, pull out of the Sadr coalition and to go along with the coalition of Maliki and the other groups. So the Iranians both applied political pressure when they need something done in the region, political pressure and physical pressure, as we've seen in the past, and that was a good example of Iranian physical pressure. On the other side, I will leave room for questioning later on this. I don't want to just stay on Iran because we have a lot to discuss. Turkey, we see continuous Turkish incursions inside Iraqi Kurdistan territory, and these are they're violating the territorial sovereignty of Iraqi Kurdistan. And I believe there's not much the KRG can do about that, to be honest with you, because of KRG's or the Kurdistan Regional Government's weak position. As you know, after the referendum, we lost a lot of our allies in the region. We lost our good relationships in Baghdad also. I think for us, the Peshmerga cannot stand against these incursions from Iran and Turkey. Because the Peshmerga right now is not the same Peshmerga during ISIS time. ISIS was a brutal enemy. They raped women and children, and the Peshmerga had no choice but to go and defend the country. So much has happened after the ISIS fight. The referendum, the losing of Kirkuk and other territories in Kurdistan, the loss of hope of the Peshmerga and the Kurdish population in Kurdistan regional government, unfortunately. I don't think the Peshmerga is willing to or is capable of fighting or preventing Iranians and Turkish incursions into Iraq. So the only weapon we would have, this is my sole belief that we could have in our hand, is going back to the Iraqi constitution and convincing the Sunnis and the Shiites that we do feel like we're part of Iraq. We're proud to be part of Iraq. And it's the job of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi constitution to prevent these incursions into KRI, because obviously we're not capable of, KRG is not coming out to say this, but they need to come out and say that we're not capable of preventing these incursions by Turkey and Iran. Because we see that the people are suffering. There's casualties from the civilian population. And I don't think it's shameful if we ask for help from Iraq, because it's obvious that we cannot prevent the Turks from continuous incursions inside KRA. What is Turkey's aim? Look, Turkey, besides these incursions, continuous bombardments on a weekly basis now. We see drone attacks, and there are a lot of civilian casualties. Okay, the excuse is PKK fighters. But by the time there's one PKK casualty, I believe there's 10 civilian casualties. Women and children being targeted all the time. The recent bombardment of one of these holiday places near Zakho, which were mainly Iraqi Arabs, made a lot of noise because the Iraqis didn't accept that. There was a lot of casualties, tens of casualties. And there was a quick reaction from all Iraqi political parties, the pre-presidencies, and kind of put a stop to certain things, but the next day they continued Turkey. Besides the drone attacks and the ongoing attacks happening, the setup of these bases, they have over 200 bases set up inside Iraqi Kurdistan and close to the Iraqi border. Again, I don't think KRG can stop Turkey from setting up more bases. KRG's lifeline is the oil supply that's being pumped out through Turkey. And the 50-year deal that I don't know too much about, but I know there's a existing deal with Turkey, is preventing KRG from doing certain things or making certain moves. I mean, if they close the border for 2 days and they stop the oil being pumped out through Turkey, I think KRG will face major problems. We already have major financial issues. So this is one thing that KRG cannot do. And again, we need to look into Iraq and the Iraqi institutions and the Iraqi constitution and seek help from other partners in Iraq to help us stop this incursions. I believe the Turkish government or the Turkish entities have an agenda that is very clear. The Wilayat of Mosul, when you look on the map and all these incursions and all these bases being set up, if you bring the old map out, Wilayat of Mosul, you see very clearly that the Turks are positioning themselves for the next 10 years or next 5 years. Or it's a strategic long-term plan. I'm not saying they're going to implement this, but this wasn't a joke when they talked about the Wilayat of Mosul. And they want to take back Wilayat of Mosul. I believe this is serious, and they are implementing it bit by bit and looking for an opportunity every time there is a gap in Iraqi politics or security gap. That's on Turkey. If we talk about Iraq a little bit, Iraq is going through a lot of changes, and it's a sensitive time for Iraq. The Tishreen demonstrations, I think, made significant changes, even though some of these changes are not visible, but I believe it's the first time in 17 years changes happened that came from the streets. These changes came from the streets. A prime minister was moved, another prime minister was put in place, and we saw a lot of unity amongst the Sunnis and Shiites with one voice, rejecting any external intervention in Iraqi politics, and they brought about some change, even though the changes maybe were not significant, but they did make some changes. And this idea is out there now, more of a nationalist idea, led by Sadr also. Sadr jumped on the wagon, took advantage of this situation, and pushed for this national idea. Those demonstrations led to early elections in Iraq. Early elections also brought about some changes in the way politics worked in the past. In the past, look, we've had a consensus government for almost 17 years in Iraq, and has not had a good result, to be honest with you. And we've always had a solid Shiite bloc, solid Kurdish bloc, solid Sunni bloc. These elections brought about some changes. And we saw for the first time a crack in the Shiite house. They broke apart. We saw a majority with Sadr and a minority with the other groups, some of them close to Iran. And the Kurdish house also was influenced by external powers, and unfortunately for the first time we saw Kurdish disunity in Baghdad, each major political party siding with one group. So I think these are the changes that the Tishreen demonstrations brought about, even though they're not visible, but they are. They exist in, I think it will be very difficult to put some of these pieces together. For example, I don't foresee the Shiites in the next elections being united. So I think this unity amongst the Shiites this will have some positive things to bring with it and some negative things. I think Iraq has had 17 years of this sort of government and not had any success. I believed maybe having a majority government would have been healthy for Iraq and having a group on the opposition side, because you can't have everybody participating in the government because there's nobody's holding anybody accountable right now. Everybody in parliament is having a seat or having a ministry or two, so they're part of the government, so they're not able to hold the government accountable for any wrongdoing. So I believe that it would have been healthy for Iraq to have a majority government, despite the negative points that Sadr brings along with him, but he was pushing that national unity and rejection of external hands in Iraqi politics, and having a majority government. These were good things that I think if he was successful in forming that majority government, it would have been healthy for Iraq. Unfortunately, he wasn't successful. We have a government now. It's been 2 weeks almost, a new government's in place. A lot of people are not too sure whether this government will be successful or not successful. I would ask the question, okay, despite what I think of Mohammed Shia Sudani, I think he has a good track record of managing those ministries he was in charge of, but being the Prime Minister and how he became Prime Minister is the big question. The system is corrupt, so there's a corrupt system. And if you look at how Mr. Mohammed Shia Sudani became Prime Minister, you see the corrupt system puts him in that position. So despite what he's like, how good he is, how loyal he is, how good he wants to do, he's surrounded by a corrupt system. And this is a major issue in Iraq. Any Prime Minister should be tackling the corruption in Iraq. Because this is eating away in Iraq. Will he be able to do that? I don't think the system around him will allow him to do that. I think every Prime Minister that's taking power, the first week they start arresting some governors, they start arresting this brigadier general, and they make a lot of noise, but when the dust settles, it's a different story, because the corrupt system, again, is around him, and he will not be allowed to do what he wishes to do. So this is the big question. I wish him all the best. I wish he's a good guy, but like I said, I don't have faith in the system. I don't have faith in the people who selected him who put him in that position. Will he be able to get out of the shadow of some of these people? If he can, then all the best to him. But I don't think they will allow him. So we'll have to wait and see. Iraq has a lot of socio-economic issues. A lot of other issues. The infrastructure's gone completely. Will he be able to, in this short time, even though he has a lot of money at his disposal? I mean, Mustafa Kazemi left him with probably $90 billion reserves, and a lot of gold. But I don't think these existing problems that have come over 15 years or 17 years, or maybe before that, will be fixed in a year and a half, even if you have a lot of money. So I don't believe, I'm not too optimistic. I wish him all the best. I wish he's successful and he can get Iraq out of this big mess, but I think the short time he has ahead of him, because don't forget, there's the question of whether he will be able to continue for 3 years, or whether he will be allowed to. Because you have Mr. Sadr sitting on the other side, outside of the government, looking for those opportunities to bring people on the streets. Once again, there are also others looking for this opportunity. So he has a difficult task ahead of him. Whether he will be able to, he's made a lot of promises to have some of these KRG partners to participate in this government. There are a lot of outstanding issues with KRG, the oil and gas issue. Okay, there's an agreement that they would deal with this, for example, according to the constitution. But what is that? It's not very clear. And if anybody in Iraq tries to turn a blind eye on the wrongdoings of, if KRG is doing any wrongdoings, they will be faced with problems. Like I said, Sadr and the streets are waiting for somebody to turn a blind eye on some of these issues. So it's not going to be easy. The issue of Peshmerga, the disputed territories for 17 years, we haven't been able to implement an inch of that article. Again, these are major issues on paper it looks good. They've had an agreement to bring KDP along to participate in this government formation, but on the implementation, I think they will face difficulties. Again, so he's facing major issues, security issues. So there are still huge security issues in Iraq. I blame most of it for lack of coordination between the security services in KRG. Like in Syria it's different, but in Iraq, being a security expert and being in counterterrorism for so many years, I believe we could have closed down those pockets of land that ISIS is controlling right now. I think the lack of coordination between our security services and Iraq, because of political differences, which I disagreed with even after 2007, after the referendum, I tried to maintain my relationship with the Iraqi security entities because I don't believe that the political disagreement should influence the security coordination. And it did, unfortunately, and that allowed ISIS to find pockets of empty land in between the Peshmerga and the Iraqi forces, and utilizes forces to try and open up a line all the way from the Iranian border, from Diyala going all the way to Syria. But I believe in Iraq, with better coordination, and sometimes you wonder whether the Iraqis want to do this, but there's an element which is institutionalized and is legal now, apparatus within the Iraqi army or the Hashd al-Sha'bi, let's say, whether they do want these problems to go away. Because their existence in certain areas is because of the existence of ISIS. So I believe there are people who want to close these gaps, but sometimes I tried so hard for so many years, going back and forth against my government's will, going to Baghdad, trying to coordinate with the Iraqi forces. I came back with no results, unfortunately. I felt like there was an element, I can't exactly, well, I can point out, but I don't want to mention, but there's an element that wants those pockets of ISIS guys to remain in those areas because it gives them a chance to keep some of their forces in those areas they're not supposed to be in, because the control should be given back to the local police, for example, in each government. Right now, this is not the case. Whether it's Hashd al-Sha'bi or the army is controlling certain security dossiers. And I think if in the case of disappearance of ISIS, some of these dossiers had to be given back to the local police, which is not in the interest of certain groups inside Iraq. But I think with better coordination, if the Iraqis wanted to, if Mohammed Shia Sudani wanted to, and can come to an agreement with KRG, with better coordination inside Iraq, we could deal with the remaining ISIS guys. Unlike in Syria. In Syria, I'll talk about it later a little bit. Syria is different dynamics. But in Iraq, with my experience, I believe we could deal with the remaining ISIS guys, at least on the military side, and then it will become the job of the security services with good intelligence. They can flush out the sleeper cells or whatever goes into hiding. But right now they're running around with armored vehicles and machine guns. This shouldn't be allowed, at least, you know. If we can go on Iraq again, we'll leave room for question. I know there's a lot of people and there's going to be a lot of questions. I don't know how much time we have later on, but I could talk about KRG. We talked about it briefly, about KRG and the tensions between KRG, the oil and gas, and the Peshmerga, the Article 140. Recently, the KRG's elections were delayed for a year, or they extended the term of parliament for a year, which shouldn't have happened. Unfortunately, it happened. People voted for these MPs to serve for 4 years. They didn't vote for them to be able to extend their term. But it happened, and it happened at a time where there was no war going on. I mean, there was no excuse for it, to be honest with you. It's happened, unfortunately, whatever the excuse was. I don't think this is healthy. Even though I've lost complete hope in Kurdistan's parliament, unfortunately. Kurdistan's parliament, unlike any other healthy parliament, has become the guardian of corruption and all the wrongdoings of KRG. Where it should be the opposite. It should be watching all the wrongdoers and taking people for questioning and holding them accountable. In Iraq, with all the outstanding issues and political issues, we've seen the Iraqi parliament hold people accountable, bring prime ministers and remove them, and bring ministers and remove them, replace them. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any of that from the current parliament in Kurdistan, and probably one of the worst 4 years of parliamentary work this year, this 4 years I've seen, unfortunately, because they were not able to bring anybody in front of the parliament, maybe once or twice, and then the government decided not to listen to the parliament, and at a ministerial level it was very difficult. The general directors even were given orders not to attend any parliament sessions and not to answer any questions to the parliament. This is unfortunate. So not too hopeful on the KRG parliament. Even I believe if there's elections next year, I'm still not too hopeful that the next parliament would be any better. It's unfortunate. I wish I could be sitting here and talking about all the good things that the Kurdistan parliament is doing, but this is a reality. And don't ask me, go and ask any person on the street in Kurdistan, and they will tell you the same. They have lost hope in the institutions, unfortunately. This hope didn't come easy. I want to explain that it took a lot of bloodshed, and Kurds got chemical gassed, Anfal campaign, and all this trust was put in this Kurdistan regional government. It's unfortunate to see now the Kurdish people turning against the government. The turnout of 73%, people voting for all the political parties, 27% voting for KDP, UK, Goran, the New Generation, all the other Islamic parties, I believe it's shameful. This is a sign of the Kurdish people losing hope in the institutions and in the system. And it's important for some of these guys to come out and say, we've failed. They shouldn't be embarrassed about it. Because if you can't identify the illness, you will not be able to treat it. Unfortunately, to come out and pretend that everything is good and there's no issues. Recently, I see a large number of the Kurdish community, some of these young guys that I greeted outside who are present here. Most of them arrived here in the UK recently. And I met with the Kurdish community yesterday, again, maybe 50 guys who recently arrived in the UK. I was shocked by what they told me, that they are staying in a hotel, there's 700 of them. And I said, all Kurdish? They said, all Kurdish. And they said, this is nothing, there's many hotels like this. Every night there's 200 or 300 young or families arriving by boats into England. This is a major issue, I think. The British government should think about this as well. Half of the money you spend here on these people, if this could be spent in Kurdistan, to encourage some of these youngsters and to give them hope, not to flee their country. But unfortunately, when I heard some of the stories, it's lack of trust in these institutions, lack of trust in this government, and not seeing any hope in the future has led to them escaping Kurdistan and trying to look for opportunities outside of Kurdistan. It's really sad, because these people are the future of our country, the youngsters. And to lose all these youngsters and leave Kurdistan with their mums and dads and the elderly, they're not going to be able to withstand all the pressures we're facing in Kurdistan. We need these young people to fight the fight in Kurdistan, but unfortunately, you cannot prevent them from fleeing Kurdistan, because when you hear their stories, you don't blame them. And I think this is disgraceful for the political parties, for the government, not looking into this issue seriously, because this is a serious issue. I was shocked. I knew there was Kurds fleeing, but when I saw these large numbers, and most of them I saw them 2 months ago in Kurdistan, and they came and greeted me on the street. Like, well, how did you get here? They sold everything they had, and they wanted to get away because they lost hope in the institutions. At the moment, KRG is going through very difficult times, guys. I'm sure you're following on the news that this unity between the political parties, even the parties who are participating in the government, now they have a coalition and have formed the government. We clearly see this is the first time since 1997 after the civil war, I see, I smell, or I hear drums being beaten for, God forbid, again, a civil war, which is something that we should avoid, all of us. We cannot go back to that. That was an experience, bad experience, that we should all learn from, and we should never allow the Kurdistan to go back. Over certain issues raised between PUK and KDP, people are talking about or putting on military parades and threatening to do this kind of thing. It should not be allowed. So the situation in Kurdistan, we've really backtracked on the past few years on many major issues. This is, like I said, on democracy, freedom of speech, human rights violations. In the recent years, what I've seen, I have not seen in years before. These are major issues. Both MPs in the Labour Party, when you visit Kurdistan, and the British government should bring up. And I'm not saying this to make KRG look bad. I'm saying this, I'm pointing this out, it's a wake-up call for them. It's a wake-up call for them. We can't have all our youth leave Kurdistan because two political parties cannot get along. They cannot push for real reforms. You know, they talk about reforms. Okay, the corruption is right at the top, without mentioning names. Okay, somebody who is corrupt cannot reform the country. You know, and you really have to point your fingers at the top politicians there. So I don't believe in this talks about reform when they talk about it. Recently, without mentioning names, there was a piece of land somewhere, and two people close to the same family both sides tried to take this piece of land. It's probably worth $1 billion, this piece of land. They're very young, these two guys as well, probably 17, 18. There was dispute, and they used military against each other. And I was hoping the father figure will pull them by the ear and advise them that they shouldn't be involved. This is corruption. They're only young. They shouldn't be involved in such case. What I understood later on was that the father figure sat them down and got a pen and divided the piece of land, said, "This piece for you." So I completely lost hope. When I saw this, I completely lost hope when people talk about reforms in Kurdistan, because, like I said, the corruption, and across the board, it's not all political parties, okay, across the board, the corruption is at the top level. And the corrupt people cannot tackle corruption, unfortunately. So, like I said, 73% of the Kurdish people didn't turn out to vote this time. This is a huge number. They are dissatisfied with the way Kurdistan is governed. They are fed up with these political parties and their lies and not delivering, lack of services, wages not being paid on time, not being able to, you talk the big talk when it every time, but when it comes to protecting your borders and stopping these incursions, you're nothing. You're very small and you're not able to do anything. So why all this dispute with Iraq? If we were not even able to protect our borders, why did we even try to separate from Iraq? We go back to this question. Why did we even try and separate from Iraq? If we knew this was our capability, we limited. We cannot push back any Iranian incursion. We cannot push back any Turkish intervention. It was a mistake. Not willing to admit that you made a mistake, it's not going to fix the problem, to be honest with you. And people don't trust you. At least you could have said, "We made a mistake, we apologize." The way ahead for us now is to mend relationship with Baghdad. We can use the constitution as the basis to solve our problems with Baghdad, and we can tap into the Iraqi institutions, we can tap into the Iraqi wealth, and the Iraqi constitution to protect us from the incoming threats from the neighboring countries. None of that is happening, unfortunately. None of this is coming out of any politician's mouth in Iraq, and they pretend everything to be good, and they try to pretend that, for the outside world to give a very clear and good picture, but the case inside, this is not the case. What I'm worried about is, the main threat right now facing KRG is the coming from the people. It's not from Turkey, it's not from Iran, it's from the youngsters who are in Kurdistan, who have lost hope in the institutions. I remember visiting some towns recently, and every town I went to, hundreds of people gathered around me and asked me to lead them to bring down this government, which I advised them not to do. I said, this government is not KDP and PUK's government. This government was brought about with a lot of bloodshed and suffering. We should try and change the system, but we can't bring down the system because the countries around us will not allow us to have a system similar to this. So the hater they had. So KRG should be very careful. Both KDP and UK, who are the main political parties composing the KRG, and Goran is in as well, they have to be very careful. There are ideas out there, and the people up there's a sense of boiling under. If they don't sense it, they should sense it. You know, apart from the incursion of Iran and Turkey, they need to be careful about what's happening on the inside, and people losing hope of the governance of KRG and the ruling political parties. I could end it there because I want to leave room. Basically, I try to cover. I can talk about Syria a little bit if you wish. Nice. I know you visited Syria a few times. How did you do that, by the way? Did you get smuggled in, or
I think you was allowed in? I think the KRG was very generous in letting us cross the border.
Okay. Well, they never used to let me cross the border.
We had to make sure that we paid homage to the right people.
Syria. What can I say about Syria? I mean, the Kurds are in a very difficult position. I think the defeat of ISIS started from Syria. The Kobani story was the first time ISIS got hit really hard, and they lost over 3,000 guys because we was watching it from the operations room, and we saw what happened. And it's the first time ISIS took a beating like that, and I think that was the start of end of ISIS. So that helped Iraq and helped ease the fights and ease the pressure on the Peshmerga in the front lines in Kurdistan, because before that fight there was only one front, and we was facing all the force coming from Syria into Iraq. So to have another front opened up in Syria kind of eased the pressure on the Peshmerga forces. And like I said, that was the start of the end of ISIS. I personally believe the solution for the Syrian Kurds is with Assad, despite what we think of Assad, okay? Because having Turkey as your next door neighbor, nothing will be allowed. No establishment separated from Syria will be allowed. So we have to be realistic. We have to approach this issue realistically and not give anybody false hopes. And my advice when I engaged with the Syrian Kurds from day one, including when we took the Americans there, I said, look, the Americans are here, take advantage of their capabilities while you can, okay? But they will not be here forever. So try to keep your lines open with the Syrian regime, because at the end of the day, your future is with this regime. Whether there's going to be a regime change, your future is with Syria. And I think they've tried, considering they've been under a lot of pressure. The situation is very complicated in Syria. I mean, they're landlocked. The Syrian or the SDF, they're landlocked. No border opening with Turkey. No border opening with Iraq. They have one border which is semi-open, and they close it, with KRG, the Fish-Khabur border crossing. So they are limited to what they can do, to be honest with you. The problem I want to address that still exists, apart from the Kurdish issue, is the security issue that still exists in Syria, and the existence of Daesh, as we saw recently with the attempt of prison break in Hasaka. They were almost successful. And the main issue of the Al-Hol camp, which I call it the nuclear bomb waiting to explode, and it will destroy the region again. Okay, in Iraq, maybe we've managed to maintain pressure on ISIS and their movement and on their operational capability, but believe me, what's happening in Syria. And before the breakup in PUK, I was going around the world trying to convince the international community not to leave SDF alone with this issue, because this is not a problem of SDF alone. 70,000 people, mainly women and children in this camp. Can you imagine children being brought up or brainwashed from the age of 1, 2, 3 will bring about a different terrorist from somebody who was 18 and who radicalized at 18. These children are being raised from the age of 1 and being brainwashed. This will be terrorism on steroids, these guys. So the international community, I was trying to get them not to turn a blind eye on this issue. This is a time bomb. It's going to explode, and it's not going to only affect Syria. It will come across into Iraq and the neighboring countries as well. But unfortunately, speaking to some of the Syrian Kurds, I believe that it's not. Syria and Iraq is not the focus any longer. With the war going on in Ukraine, the economic fight with China, Syria and Iraq is not on anybody's agenda, but I want to re-raise this. That's at the beginning when ISIS came about, I tried to convince people that this is not a local problem, help us. Before the coalition came, and this is a problem for you guys, we cannot. And soon ISIS became a global problem, and everybody had to come and clean up the mess, spending more money, more lives, put at risk. This is the same thing. They're turning a blind eye on this issue. It's a major issue. I know Syria is not the focus, but that's a time bomb. And it's going to explode, and it's going to get messy for the region and for the world. The people who are turning a blind eye on this issue will have to come and clean up the mess, spending more resources and risking more lives. So that threat of ISIS, apart from Al-Hol camp, there are other groups of ISIS still remaining in Syria, and they are a major threat for the stability of the region, and not only for Syria. And I wanted to raise this as well, and I would like to end it here. Thank you very much, and I would take questions. Let people be free to ask any questions they want to ask, and I will try to be as frank as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think you have given an extremely full account. There will, I'm sure, be many questions, including, I'm sure, your role in the PUK, and it was interesting. Yes, well, no, your role in that period of the PUK up to your retirement, I think, is interesting. And I guess what you're saying is an affront to democracy in the region, that the turnout was so low. But is that what you're saying is the PUK as well failed to put forward a platform that excites and interests people? And what should that platform be? What is the hope in terms of not just everyone needs unity to come together, but what are the concrete material things that need to happen? I'm sure will be a question that will come up. I'm pleased that you talked about Syria there. I'm giving a bit of time for people to put their hands up, so then I will see. I'm pleased that you talked about Syria there. I visited that camp,
yes.
The whole camp, and it is absolutely...
And you're alive. You came out.
Well, yes, I visited in a van and I didn't get out. But no, I visited, and it is scary. It is very scary what's happening there. But then the Turkish incursions into Syria and into the KRI are also equally scary, and we have Iran as well. So, I have some questions. I'm going to go on. If you don't mind, what I will try and do is take all the questions in one block.
Okay.
Is that okay, or would you prefer me to break it down?
It's up to you. I think
I will try.
Maybe break it down a little bit.
I'll try and break it down then. I'm just aware that I want to get as many people in as possible. So the key probably is to put your hand up in this round and not to be shy and put your hand up later. I'm going to take this side first. I will then, or some on this side first. We'll then come back to you,
sure.
And then I'll try and take some on that side, if that's okay. So on this side, going from closest to furthest away, I'll try and get a smattering of everyone. If you could go first, please stand up. There is some microphones, but you'll have to stand up and speak loudly, I'm afraid, for you to be picked up.
My name is Banu, and I thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak.
I wanted to ask, as a society, we've discouraged our youth from participating in events like this. I myself, as a 19-year-old international relations student, am very disappointed in the turnout of youth that we have in this event. What are we doing to ensure that students like myself have this opportunity to participate in the future?
Perfect. Thank you very much. The woman down there, and then the two gentlemen here.
I thought that a long question.
I would like you to get to the question and not a statement. So if you can get there, if it's too long, I will stop you.
Thank you for your illuminating talk. My question is in two parts. Although there are many individuals, including yourself, who have worked for the government in Bashar with voice support for a degree of Kurdish autonomy, and indeed I recognise your work to support Shengal, the KRG's response is in contrast to those individuals who see this in their regional policies and diplomatic relations, and as I just declared, are proud to be part of Iraq, which has given Turkey the confidence to deforest the Hawk, bomb Zafar, and build over 14 bases in the region. These bombings pose two problems. One is an ecological crisis with ramifications on the civilian populations along with the rest of the Middle East as they suffer a looming water crisis. Furthermore, it is an internal security breach which regularly leaves the Kurds exposed to death and genocide from the Turkish government. What is the motivation for the KRG's lax response? Arguably, the KRG would benefit from supporting the Kurds on its immediate external neighbours, because irrespective of what the KRG feels about belonging to Iraq, or how much it has fair relations with Turkey, your problem is not Kajak or PKK on the border, rather the threat of grey wolf ideology promoted by Erdogan's military and government, the support that they give ISIS, particularly Melik Kandravardi of Sadat.
That's a long question.
The history of Al-Assad suggests they're not reciprocating your feelings. Excuse me, I'm talking.
Sorry.
The history of Al-Assad suggests they are not reciprocating your warm feelings and are not intending to support a future KRG. In fact, they're hoping to abolish it. Now, this affects...
Thank you.
What's your question?
Okay. So I think your question is, what's your analysis of this particular crisis? Okay.
Of being a threat?
Of being a threat on your border.
Yeah.
I didn't say PKK and Kajak being a threat.
You mentioned that they're the problem.
Look, you've asked the question.
I said Turkey is using PKK as an excuse, but while one PKK guy gets killed, 10 civilians get killed. I never said PKK. I think the problem is bigger than that. That's an excuse. I never mentioned that. I never said that.
But I think you can address the question when we come back to it, the wider point when we come back to it.
Yes.
But
sure.
Thank you. The gentleman there, yes.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see you, Captain Hall.
Hello, good to see you, Chris. You're everywhere I go. You're following me.
That sort of guy. I apologise for being old. I'd love you to answer the question that the right honourable gentleman posed out here on the UK. But also, this is very rudely, but I have a suggestion. I often remember watching Kurdish politics, and you see the two Politburos outside the parliament. Why are they not inside the parliament? Why? Because I think there's great Kurdish political talent, but in reference to your point around the parliament, it's outside the parliament rather than inside.
Okay.
Yes, because...
Fantastic.
And is there a way around that? But really, I'd like to hear what...
I'll take one more on this side, then I'll go back to this side, and then I will come back. That's what I'm going to try and do. Gentleman there.
Mr. Darwani, it's been fantastic listening to you for the first time. Very insightful. My question is not going to be too long, I assure you. It will be straightforward. One, are you in favor of being with Turkey, with Iraq, or with Syria in the future, and why? Can I repeat the question?
No, it's easy. I can give you the answer now, with Iraq. I want to give you answer. Now, we're part of Iraq. Look, can I answer this one?
You can go answer all four now, go on.
So thank you. But I want to start with this gentleman's question. Look, I look at the Kurds in Turkey. They're not even by one word, their names have not been mentioned in the Turkish constitution. I look at the Iranian Kurds, they have no rights. I look at the Syrian Kurds, they don't even have an identification to say that they are citizens of that country. I look at the Iraqi Kurds, look, we've been given an opportunity, okay? We are part of Iraq, we have an autonomous region, we are included in the constitution, all our rights. And I remember the late Talabani and Noshir Mustafa and Mr. Barzani told us, I remember, in 2003, 2005, when the constitution was written, said, we have what we wanted for, what we fought for, we have it in this constitution. So how comes now we're standing against this constitution? That you all told us that this is, we got what we wanted, what we deserved. Okay? I believe Iraq is a rich country, okay? Culturally wealthy country. We could benefit from being part of Iraq, you know, but we shouldn't be. It's our country, we're part of Iraq. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Iraq has given me all these rights. I voted for this constitution, okay? And then for somebody to get close to any of these Iraqi institutions to call him a traitor, but it's okay for somebody else to go and lead the Iranian troops or the Turkish troops, and he's not a traitor. Okay, so I totally believe in Iraq. And I believe our future, after the failure of the referendum, we should have learned our lesson, is with Iraq, and we should be thankful that Iraq accepts us as part of Iraq, and Kurds will benefit from Iraq's wealth in every different aspect. But politicians need to come out and say it, be brave, say we're proud to be Iraqi Kurds. Yeah, they feel ashamed to say we're Iraqis. Why do you feel ashamed? What do you have to show for? What have you shown to your people in governing for the past 30 years? I'm sorry? So I'm going to be the one saying that I'm a proud Iraqi Kurd from now on, because I want to bring about a better future. And I believe with Iraq I can do that. I can tap into the Iraqi wealth and build a better future for these youngsters so they don't have to flee Kurdistan, because the Kurdish system has failed. The Kurdish government has failed. So they can keep quiet, you know, and I'm not going to be afraid of saying I'm an Iraqi. It doesn't matter if they call me a traitor. Oh, you've left Kurdistan and your nationalistic ideas behind, and you are an Iraqi. And no, I'm part of Iraq. Look, you have an Iraqi passport. It's okay. You have an Iraqi flag behind you, but you're embarrassed to say you're Iraqi. Why? We need to get through this. We need to break this, I think. Unless we do that, we have no future, to be honest with you. This government has no future. KRG cannot continue the way they have done. If that may have answered your question. Did that answer your question?
We've got why. So why? And so the next question was why do the leaderships of the parties, why are they not really in Parliament? Why don't they get stuck in?
Because they think Parliament's a joke. They don't. They see Parliament as a low thing. They see themselves above Parliament.
Is it a chicken and egg? If they don't take Parliament
Look,
serious,
the first Kurdish Parliament that was established in 1990, people like Fuad Maqsoom, who was the previous president, okay, most of this current leadership of PUK, the older generation, they were the ones who participated in Parliament, you know. But slowly, Parliament became a joke, and I think intentionally, the people who will be running the government, they don't want a strong Parliament because they don't want to be brought in for questioning and have to give answers to this sort of people. So they look at it as a low thing, and many of the leadership do not want to participate and be a member of Parliament, unfortunately, which I think, you know, you're right. They should have been in Parliament, these people. They're extra, these Politburo and leadership, they should be the ones in Parliament and pushing for these legislations. And
the right honourable journal asked an excellent question on the PUK.
what's happening with PUK? Oh, it's all over social media. It's unfortunate what happened to PUK, to be honest with you, especially what happened with us. I think what happened with me is smaller than what's happening right now. Okay? For me, if I reacted, I had to have bloodshed and spill blood. I was not willing to do that over a political position, even though I was voted as the highest voter in the last Congress. But when I saw the people standing in front of me willing to use arms, willing to use military, I had to take a step back, and I was not willing to have bloodshed, have blood on my hand, because I want to be a leader of PUK. Now, I think leadership was to serve my people. I think leadership, that position is not important for me. I can serve people in other ways. But I think I saw what was happening. It was bigger than PUK. It was an external hand. Okay? It was very clear. My disagreement with Turkey over Syria, my disagreement with the Iranian government over certain things that was happening on the other side of the border, and I was stopping it from happening. My disagreements with KDP kind of bring all these elements together and use PUK internal force against me, and I think I managed it really well, to be honest with you, because I saved lives, and I'm still alive, and I can come back easily, and that position can go to hell. As long as there's no bloodshed under my rule over a silly position like that, I'm quite happy with the way the outcome. I'm still there. Actually, it changed the way people thought about me. Maybe people in the past, only inside PUK, used to look at me in a certain way, but I think after what happened to me, I think the public opinion changed. And look what's happened a year and a half on. I wish them all the best, and I haven't said any bad word against PUK, but I wish they could have done better than what I did. Okay, I would have applauded them from my house. I wouldn't have even gone back to politics, because I would have said, well, there's a group that can run this party and can lead these people and can fix people's lives and give them better opportunities. But unfortunately now I'm being bombarded in my house on a daily basis. Hundreds of people show up in my house asking me to come back and asking me, when are you going to save us from this? So the situation's only got worse. And it's got worse for KDP as well. KDP regrets any involvement they had in this deal with me, because they realized with me, I was very front forward like this. If I was against them, I was against them. I never tried to trick them and go behind their back and deal with the next door neighbor to achieve what I wanted. I was very clear. I was unhappy with the way KDP was governing. I was unhappy on certain things, and I was very vocal about it. And it was not to bring down the government, it was to actually fix these issues. But right now, look what's happened right now. I mean, like I said, for the first time I sense the smell of civil war coming back, which is disgraceful for anybody attempting to do such a thing, And no Peshmerga should fire a bullet for any of these political parties if any party attempts to do such a thing. This is not 1997, we've gone past that, we suffered, we should put that behind us. But politically, to be honest with you, everybody thought that I was finished politically. From my house, I can do so many things, to be honest with you. Look, there's an opportunity, like I said, 73%. If PUK doesn't want me, I know 90% of the PUK cadres, they love me. They love me and they're still in touch with me, but they're afraid. Because recently there was attacks against people who were close to me. People were killed. Okay? And you've seen the last Erbil bombing, what happened. I'm not saying PUK did it, but there was people who are part of PUK that were involved. And that's not me, that's the KRG saying this. And the court has issued warrants to have these people arrested. But look, there's real opportunities right now, because 73% of the Kurdish population didn't vote for KDP, for PUK, for all the other political parties.
Two other questions here, if you want to address them. One is about, the KRG is a home and an inspiration often for both Iranians and people in Turkey, including the PKK, who are fighting a wider fight for Kurdish liberation. It sometimes feels like the KRG is siding too much with Turkey, or even in your conversations with, would you need to put them into camps, would you need to make a deal with Iran so that Iran and Turkey don't attack? Is there a feeling sometimes that the KRG would be better in just standing up and saying, no, we're protecting these people because they're all Kurds? Or is that just not possible?
Look, it's not possible. It's not possible for KRG. I know KRG is in a difficult position, but like I said, KRG could use the Iraqi institutions and the Iraqi constitution without direct involvement with Turkey and Iran to protect itself. Okay?
And therefore protect the Kurds.
Protect the Kurds that are there under your umbrella. I didn't mention it's the fault of PKK. The PKK has been there for 20-something years in those mountains. I can't have the Turks expect me to go and remove the PKK for them. And first of all, I don't believe that there's a military solution for the Kurdish cause in Turkey. Mm-hmm. Okay, we had 40 years of fighting. What happened? The PKK vanished? No, PKK got stronger. HDP got stronger. You're going to kill 2,000 PKK guys in the mountain. They will be replaced with 2 million Kurds inside Turkey. Mm-hmm. So there's no military solution for this issue. And I've raised it with the Turks in the past in my capacity that during the peace process, which PUK was a major part of that peace process. My late uncle, Mr. Jalal Talabani,
Yeah.
Turkey flourished. Turkey opened up to the West Turkish economy. You know, this was the period where Turkey was enjoying so much. And look what's happened now. The economy's gone down the drain. And
Perfect.
Sorry.
I'm going to. So, and you got the youth. I'm going to. There's the youth question, and then there are lots of other people with hands up.
so the question was, what should we do to encourage you to participate in?
Yeah, in some sense, because I feel like when you talk about politics, it's always, you shouldn't do it, it's not your position, that kind of thing. So what are we doing to actually encourage them and allow them to have some kind of say in their future?
Well, I tell you, there's never a dull moment in Kurdish politics, so that should encourage you to be engaged into politics.
Look, I'm going to take a smashing on this side. I'm going to try and come back to this side to do some at the back as well, the back section. So this gentleman here, the woman in the dark red, and then the gentleman next to her, and then we'll maybe squeeze in some more as well on this side. Go on, sorry.
Thank you for coming and sharing this grim, depressing picture of Kurdistan.
Yeah, why should be I the only one suffering? You guys should suffer with
Very grateful, thank you. So the question is, what happened 5 years ago in Dhaka referendum and October? Our information, what we are following in Kirkuk and Germian, Arabization is on the top. People being evicted in their villages after that. What could the KRG and the political parties could do to stop this and give assurances to our beloved brothers and sisters to stay there, to work with the Iraqi government? Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and then.
Hi, I'm Gordon Rani. I'm a freelance journalist and also a professional interpreter. And it's really clear and really the history of the KRG have so many vacuums, have so many turbulence. That's absolutely right. But to cut the story short, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Hamman, what do you think the alternative is, and what's the pragmatical steps must be taken by the PUK and the KD? Right.
for the future.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Talabani, I believe Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria need to be very proud to have Kurds. And I am Rojava, I am Rojava, I am Bashur, I am Baku, I am Kirkuk, I am Kurdistan, and I am proud.
So am I.
The gentleman in the blue.
Okay, I'd like to begin by welcoming you and thanks for this opportunity. Before I ask my question, you asked the question to the whole audience by replying to that question. You said, you were saying, why is it so hard for an Iraqi Kurd to say he's an Iraqi Kurd and go participate and just do everything about that? I think if you look at the slightest history, the Kurdish history in Iraq, that will answer why it's so difficult. And I don't think the current formal government is not saying they're working against the Iraqi constitution. They're saying that they want to go by the constitution, but that the people in Baghdad are,
Cherry picking the.
cherry picking.
Yeah.
There's a new smell of anarchism, neo-anarchism, and nationalism. But my question was, that was just a quick answer to that, what you asked. Why is it so difficult for Kurds to go back into Iraq as an Iraqi Kurd? But the question is, when you first started speaking, you mentioned the Iranian Kurds, who's been resisting for over 40 days now.
For resisting for?
For over 40 days, 45, 6 days, I don't know exactly.
The demonstrations. Iranian Kurds?
Yes.
It's not just Kurds, it's across the board, it's multi-ethnic.
As a Kurdish political figure,
Yes.
don't you think it's wrong to, just without giving any more explanation or anything, say that you don't think they're going to succeed? I mean, there was a time when we were fighting in Iraq, the same way we're doing now.
But do you want me to be realistic or do you want me to give false hope? I'm trying to be realistic. Because I look at the Kurdish opposition sitting on this side of the border, they're not willing to sit down together and engage together over one word. I see no hope. I mean, these people, they're brave, they're out there risking their lives, but without any true leadership, you're only going to end up getting all these people killed without any results.
But the same mentality, why do we see hope for fighting corruption in Iraqi Kurdistan? when it's growth from top to down?
Why do I see hope?
Yes. I thought you said you see hope. You said it needs to change.
Because 73% of the people didn't vote for them, so a majority of people are against the way they're governing. Look, my heart and soul is with the Kurdish people there, don't forget, and I paid a heavy price. Okay, from Turkey, from Iran. I'm a living price payer in front of you, okay? My political career ended up the way it ended up because I supported Kurds in Iran, I supported Kurds in Turkey, and I physically was in Rojava fighting the fight with them, okay? But I'm trying to be realistic. I believe the Iranian government can be brutal, without any true leadership that can bring all these people together. And it's not about just the Kurds there. This time, the demonstrations are different. It's across, it's multi-ethnic, Fars, Kurds, everybody. That's why this is where the strength of these demonstrations come from. If you try to separate the Kurds can be easily crushed. And we've seen in the past. So I don't like to separate the Kurds this time. That's why I didn't mention the Kurds by themselves, because if they are included with the Fars, with the Azeris, I think this is better protection for them, because if you separate the Kurds, I think they will use the Iranian Kurdish opposition on this side and they will crush the Kurdish demonstration. So this is why I didn't want to mention the Kurds separately.
Okay,
Sorry.
perfect. No, I think you've answered that question well. In terms of an alternative programme and kind of what happened 5 years ago, and what do we need to give confidence of Kurds so that they don't just flee from areas that are being Arab, turned ethnically and changed ethnically. Do you have any answer to that, or do you?
Again, I believe this could be solved through dialogue. We cannot go into a fight with Iraq and fight over territory, because we tried that and we lost. We lost Kirkuk, we lost Khanaqin, we lost Sinjar. So the only alternative, the only solution for this is to mend relationship with Shiites, mend relationship with the Sunnis, try to be part of Iraq and argue this in parliament. Your rights are in the constitution. Mm-hmm. Fight over the constitution. I think this is the only weapon we have. I'm being realistic. I'm not trying to demoralize you guys, but I'm being realistic because I don't want to fool my people. Our politicians lie to our people on a daily basis. Okay? It's time that we came out and told the truth. What we are, what we're capable of. Otherwise, we will not get anywhere. I'm not willing to lie to my people, whether you like it or don't like it. This is the reality. Being in the security business, I know the capabilities of the security forces. I know what we can withstand and what we can't withstand. I believe the Iraqi constitution is the only force that we could use to preserve what we have. Otherwise, we will lose what we have right now. Okay, it's not the Peshmerga. The Peshmerga are brave, but they can only do so much. It's not the Asaish, it's not the counter-terrorism. They can do only so much. Okay, the tool we have to protect ourselves and to preserve what's left of KRG is the Iraqi constitution. And if anyone wants to argue that's fine, but I believe this. As a security expert, I know the capabilities of our forces. We're not going to be able to withstand the pressures existing and coming in the future against KRG.
Okay, thank you. Look, I know I said that I would take another round. I don't know if you need to rush on. I will try and take 2 more questions, if that's okay, because I know that we're running back. And I said I would take them from the back. Not everyone.
Did we answer the gentleman's question about the displaced people in Kirkuk and?
Oh well, do you want to answer that question?
Oh, yes, because he keeps looking at me.
Yeah. And then we'll take 2 from the back, and then we'll go from there.
Constitution is the answer. Believe me, because we cannot fight this fight. We cannot be Peshmerga engaging in a fight with the Iraqi army. We have to be realistic. Again, mending relationships in Baghdad, we can get people to feel sorry for us and to go according to the constitution. The future of those places are in the Article 140. So pushing for implementation of Article 140 will be the solution for these areas, and will prevent people from fleeing those areas, I think.
Fantastic. I've got a gentleman right at the back there in a tie and a grey suit.
Thank you very much. So my question is about large number number of Kurdish refugees who are coming to
This country.
southern Kurdistan. There are many young ones, and they're coming in large numbers. We know the reason is because of the lack of protection, security, lack of opportunity, lack of freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and also corruption, and lack of justice. So these are the main reasons that people flee the country. My question is whether this is the responsibility of Iraqi government, the KRG government, or the two political parties based in the UK. So who's responsible for the fact that large number of young Kurds from southern Kurdistan into this country and into other parts of Europe? Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And then I've got, very difficult, but I've got a woman there with the scarf on.
Just have been speaking about Syria, where they defeated ISIS, DFS, and sacrificed about 11,000 martyrs. And at the end of the day, you say that their future is with Assad. Assad should be brought to the justice because he killed how many thousand people, how many millions? He killed 500,000 of these people, and he displaced many people. And for Kurdish area, he doesn't recognize Kurdish area. He doesn't recognize the rights of Kurdish people in Syria. And when they went to discuss with Assad about our issue, our cause, he said, you should resolve everything, and you should join our forces, and you should you just have your rights, education rights, something like this, very simple rights. So how our future, my question is, you said our future with Assad, our future is not
With Syria, not Assad.
You said with
Yeah.
Assad, but no matter, with Syria, but which kind of Syria? Democratic Syria, not this kind of
Yes, of course.
And
Yes,
the
of course.
future, there is no constitution, there is no thing, no organization, no regulation. How will it be? And I mean, the United States is supporting Kurdish forces. United States, if they leave, if they live, then there is no support. They will be destroyed
And-
like,
and I-
with
That's the answer to your question.
Africa.
That's the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
I understand.
I think we've got-
I agree
we've
with
got
you.
the
I agree
question,
with you.
yeah.
But that's the answer to your question. That last word you said, the United States will leave. What happens when the United States leaves? Turkey will come in and
So-
destroy
sorry,
what we...
Sorry, I think. Sorry, madam. I think Madam, I'm going to now ask you to sit down. That's fine. We've heard your question. Thank you. I think I'm going to.
Please let me answer. Because
I'll let you
this is like-
answer. I
First of
think
all,
we
you need
totally
to know
understand
I'm
you,
the
yes.
one that took the United States to Syria. Okay, I was there on the ground before United States, before the British government. It took me many trips to the States, to London, to convince these two governments that they should be in Syria. Okay, so I am the one that took the United States to Syria. But I told them the first day I took the United States there, I said, look, take advantage of the United States being here, but they're not going to be here forever. We saw what happened in Afghanistan. There's no guarantees that US policy on Syria will remain the same. They could get up and leave. What would the Kurds do then? Be left in the hands of Turkey. So when I'm saying, I'm being realistic, when I'm saying your future is with Syria, you need to leave a channel open with Syria. Whether we like Assad's regime or not, it's not by choice. This is all you have. You have on this border Kurdistan, and you disagreeing with the Kurdish political parties on this side. Iraq has closed its border. Turkey closes the border to you. The only hope you have is with Syria. I'm not saying that Assad is a great guy, that we should all worship him, but this is reality on the ground. I'm trying to tell you what opportunities there are in front of these people. I don't want to mislead them and tell them, no, the world is great and everybody's going to come to their rescue. Because when there was nobody there to help them, I was the one carrying weapons and ammunition on the back of my guards, smuggling it into Syria to help the Kurds. So I'm being realistic, and I hope you understand that. You know, I don't want to fool the Syrian Kurds. I'm trying to tell them how I see their future. The future is with Syria, because Turkey will never allow a separatist region in that area. And this is a reality whether we like it or not, to be honest with you.
And then the final question, and I know there's lots of other hands, but I know that we were meant to be wrapping up at 22. But the final question was around who's to blame about the problem that we have in the KRI now. Is it, and the refugee, and the fact that people are leaving in huge numbers? Is it the PUK? Is it the Iraqi government? Is it all of them? And who needs to come and fix it?
According to PUK and KDP, I was to blame. Okay? But well, to be honest with you, the answer to that would be PUK and KDP. Equally. I am not going to say it's KDP more than PUK, because they were the most two dominant political parties governing Kurdistan for the past 32 years. Okay? They're the ones who should take responsibility. You can't go and blame Goran, who came into the government, has two ministries, and it's a joke. It's PUK, KDP, wrong policies being applied, the wrongdoings, all the mistakes we made, all the miscalculations we made, you know, with a referendum, for example, being one of them. You know, it was miscalculation. The whole world came down and said that you can't do this. We're against you. We didn't listen to anybody. Okay? And then when we tried to prevent the fight in Kirkuk, again, now we're going to fight the Iraqi army. Why am I going to fight the Iraqi army? I'm part of Iraq, for Christ's sake. I am. This is a mistake. If I'm not willing to fight the Turkish army that's coming into Kurdish territory, I'm not willing to fight. Why am I going to fight the Iraqi army? So I believe Kurdish political parties, mainly PUK and KDP, and this corrupt system is to blame. And look, they shouldn't be happy that PUK's got 18 seats and KDP's got 31 seats. The numbers look high, but if you look at the number of voter turnout, this is very low. This is very low, and they should be worried for their future, to be honest with you. They should be worried for their future. A PUK that used to get 50% of the Kurdish votes, and KDP used to get 49 by 51. Now, if you divide these numbers, PUK only got 9% of Soleimani's votes in the last election. If they continue in this path, they will get 5% of Soleimani's votes, and Soleimani being the stronghold of PUK. Okay, KDP the same. KDP is not doing so much better than PUK. It looks all good from the outside, but believe me, on the inside, if it wasn't for the lower turnout vote, they wouldn't get the number of seats that they get. So I believe KDP and PUK, and I think they should be gentle enough and stand up and say we've made mistakes and apologize to the public, you know, and try to open up a serious dialogue with the youth, with the youngsters, and with the public. Right now, there's a disconnect between the public and the ruling parties. And the gap is increasing day by day, and the danger on Kurdistan is more and more day by day.
Okay. Thank you very much. Look, I know that other people will have wanted to ask questions, but we are out of time. And I appreciate what you've said. Not everyone will agree with what you said. Some things I think have made me think, and made me think.
It's not a question. I just want to salute Mr. Talibani. This is a brutal honesty, unbelievable. I'm following everything as a journalist, as a commentator, but really amazing.
Thank you.
On that note, thank you.
Thank you very much.